Feminism. A movement and an ideology that has had its good name tarnished in recent times thanks to the hijacking of the movement by a different creed altogether, anti-feminism. Anti-feminism spearheads a movement radically different from what feminism is or should be about, which is equality. And that's because anti-feminism isn't interested in equality. It isn't interested in the feminist ideals of old, those that take us far back in history, from the suffragettes' long and arduous fight for equal rights to the golden Elizabethan era of the 16th century. Simply put, the anti-feminist is only interested in two things: power and control. And disciples of the movement, and there are many, will do whatever it takes, other than actual hard work, of course, to attain these goals. Sounds like something you might be interested in? Well then, prepare yourselves for a power trip like no other. For a disciple to have any hopes of succeeding as an anti-feminist, one must own a copy of the Anti-Feminist Handbook. According to the handbook, the starting point for any anti-feminist to elevate her station in life is not through hard work and perseverance, but through marrying up. The handbook heavily emphasizes the use of one's womanly charms to attract a chosen target. In fact, it has an entire chapter dedicated to that called The Art of Seduction, where it implores its followers to, and I quote, never let up until their intended target has been acquired. Failure is not even considered as an option, for this was a book written for the narcissists of this world, who don't understand or respect anyone else's boundaries but their own. If a disciple has to step on every family member, lover, friend, or colleague, then she must do so, because nothing else matters than an anti-feminist's climb to the top. In order to charm a target, a disciple must study them intensely before attempting an approach. A successful acquisition can only be made by studying their every detail, their likes and dislikes, their hobbies and interests, their beliefs and values, before taking on all of these qualities as a disciple's own, regardless of the fact that the two parties may actually have entirely nothing in common. Like attracts like, they say, so it would do a disciple well to start dressing like her target, sharing their tastes in music and film, pretending to be a humanitarian, and why stop there? Tap into their deepest traumas by impersonating their dead mother or pretending to communicate with her beyond the veil. The sky is the limit within the anti-feminist movement, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. A minor warning, however: some targets may prove to be too savvy and will only be further repulsed by a disciple's advances. In such a case, make sure to steer clear of such personalities, for they are the arch nemesis of the anti-feminist. Once a disciple has successfully executed this tricky step and arrives at the top, which anyone blessed with sufficient beauty and charm will certainly achieve, they may allow themselves to bask in their own glory and soak up the attention and accolades that they so desperately needed to have any semblance of self-worth. And this should be done with immense pride, despite the fact that their newfound stardom and success had nary a thing to do with their own particular talents and efforts, and everything to do with the status of the man who put a ring on their little finger. Nothing encapsulates the essence of an anti-feminist as much as this prior statement. Hold on to it, memorize it, let it be your guide in the perilous journey to come. If you have made it this far, then congratulations are in order, for you have successfully completed one of the most difficult steps of the Anti-Feminist Handbook, infiltrating your desired social circle and acquiring your meal ticket. But the work doesn't end here. Although some of the movement's less ambitious disciples may choose to drop off at this point and enjoy the fruits of their labor, at least until they are inevitably found out. But for those with a thirst for more than just the privilege and status that comes with a wealthy match, the laborious path to the pinnacle of anti-feminism continues. It is important to recognize that the anti-feminist movement understands the popularity of its more benevolent counterpart, feminism, and disciples are encouraged to exploit this popularity by hijacking it. Which is where the second step comes in, the hijack. A crucial tenet of the anti-feminist movement is to master the art of manipulation, with the goal of convincing absolutely everyone, perhaps including oneself, that the disciple is a benevolent and altruistic feminist at heart, when nothing could be further from the truth. For this step, an in-depth knowledge of feminism is presumed. How else could you hope to infiltrate their ranks and hijack their cause if you know next to nothing about it? A disciple must employ the same tactics relied upon when attempting to attract the target. Just as you created a persona for them to fall in love with, play the part of the staunch feminist to trick them and the rest of the world now that you're finally on the world stage. Embrace the hypocrisy. Become a hypocrite, if you're not already one. Lecture other women on the importance of hard work and education, and invent stories about yourself to further illustrate your point. Deny the truth of your parents' contributions to your success. Erase your entire history and replace it with a fictional rags to riches story. Because no one likes an already privileged person coming into even more privilege. More daring disciples could even take it a step further and become the face of feminist movements and campaign against matters such as domestic violence, despite being perpetrators of it themselves. In this movement, the world is your oyster, and the list of all the dirty and manipulative tactics at your disposal has no limit. Now we arrive at the final step of the Anti-Feminist Handbook, the ultimate step to attain all the power and control that a disciple could ever dream of, the discard. Now, a quick warning for those of you who have made it this far. This phase is not for the faint of heart. To be able to discard is to be heartless, cruel, and entirely self-serving. A disciple must be able to view people as mere tools to be used and cast aside when no longer useful, rather than as fellow human beings. And make no mistake, no one is off limits. Not even your meal ticket, whom you've worked so hard to snag, is to be spared. Now the good news is, disciples who have already discarded people in their climb to the top will naturally find it easier to execute this step. For some, it might even be second nature to them. And to those who hesitate, well, let me remind you what's at stake. Power and control. That is what you signed up for, isn't it? Now, the work doesn't end there. In addition to this affinity for using and discarding people, disciples must also be adept at ignoring the fact that their entire value on the world stage as a global player has been a direct result of marrying up. After all, if a disciple had anything of substance to offer the world, well, what are you doing following the anti-feminist movement? This blatant lack of self-awareness and insight, to the point of delusion, is key to have any hopes of succeeding in this phase, for without it, you will falter. However, there is a proviso that must be mentioned purely for legal purposes, because the folks over at the anti-feminist movement couldn't care less what actually ends up happening to its disciples. Proceed at your own peril, for failure of this step is imminent. In fact, there hasn't been a single success story to emerge as a result of this final phase to date. The movement has already had more than one woman try and spectacularly fail, resulting in global humiliation of the highest order. And since then, another brave disciple has waded into the treacherous waters to attempt this very dangerous and high-risk maneuver. And word has it that it's not exactly going too well for her either. The peculiar thing is that the handbook is silent on what to do in case of such catastrophic failure, or any failure at all for that matter. In fact, this step is where the handbook ends. Funny that. I mean, who wrote this garbage? Oh, well, that explains a lot. Go to www.theantifeministmovement.com to order your copy today.